I am sympathetic to DOGE, to the whole Department of Government Efficiency.
How unreal is it that it's called DOGE?
Actually, with Elon, it's quite real. I guess I've just, I've accepted Elon as a major political figure in the US. But the DOGE committee, the Department of Government Efficiency, is a non-statutory agency that has zero funding that Donald Trump says will advise OMB, the Office of Management and Budget. Now, two things. Number one is, as I predicted, DOGE would become a quote unquote blue ribbon commission. So this is a non-statutory blue ribbon commission that has been given authority to Vivek Ramaswamy and to Elon Musk. Secondary, their recommendations to government should be complete by July of 2026, according to the press release released by Trump. First of all, what that will mean is they're probably going to need private funding to even set all this up. That's great. Not a problem for Elon. But you're basically going to be able to have to commission GAO reports, Government Accountability Office, and other reports and fact-finding missions across the government, which is fantastic. Trump can even empower you to go through to every agency and to collect figures. None of it matters one iota if Republican appropriators in the House of Representatives care what you have to say. Historically, they don't give a shit what the executive office has to say. So every year, the president releases his own budget. It used to mean something, but in the last decade or so, it's become completely meaningless. The House Ways and Means Committee and the People's House are the ones who originate all appropriations and set up spending. So that's one, is that DOGE in and of itself has no power. It has no ability to compel or force people to do anything. Its entire case for being, really, if you think about it mechanically, is to try and convince and provide a report to Republican legislators to be able to cut spending. So that's that. Now, we all know how Congress takes to government reports and whether they get acted on or not. So that's number one. Number two is the figures that Elon is throwing out there. I want to give them some advice because people do not understand federal government spending. The absolute vast majority of government spending is entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare, which are untouchable under Donald Trump and the most politically popular programs in the world, and military spending. Discretionary non-military spending, I don't have the exact figure in front of me, is a very, very small part of the federal budget. Now, within that small slice, about 90% of that 8 is bipartisan and is supported by like everybody. NOAA, the hurricane guys, like people like that. People who are flying into the eye of the hurricane, people who are government inspectors of X, Y, and Z. The parts that are controversial that you're actually able to touch, things like welfare programs, like food stamps, is an extraordinary small slice. So what's the number he put out there? 5 trillion, something like that. There is only one way to do that. And it realistically, under the current thing, you have to radically change the entire way that the Pentagon buys everything. And I support that, but I just want to be very, very clear. But I haven't seen enough energy around that. There's this real belief in the US that we spend billions on all of these programs that are doing complete bullshit. But like the truth, the absolute vast majority of it is military spending and entitlements. Trump has made clear entitlements are off the table. It's not going to happen. So the way that you're going to be able to cut realistically military spending over a decade-long period is to really change the way that the United States procures military equipment, hands out government contracts. Elon actually does have the background to be able to accomplish this because he has had to wrangle with SpaceX and the bullshit that Boeing's been pulling for over a decade. But I really want everybody's expectations to be very set around this. Just remember, non-statutory, blue ribbon. So if he's serious about it, I just laid out all of these hurdles that he's going to have to overcome. And I'm not saying him and Vivek aren't serious dudes, but you got to really know the system to be able to accomplish this.
So you just laid out the reality of how Washington works. To give the counterpoint that I think you're probably also rooting for is that one is a statement like Peter Thiel said, don't bet against Elon.
Sure.
One of the things that you don't usually have with Blue Ribbon is the kind of megaphone that Elon has.
True.
And I would even set the financial aspects aside. Just the influence he has with the megaphone, but also just with other people who are also really influential.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can have real power when backed by sort of a populist movement.
I don't disagree with you, but let me give you a case where this just failed. So Elon endorsed who for Senate Majority Leader? Rick Scott, right? Who got the least amount of votes in the U.S. Senate for GOP leader? Rick Scott. John Thune is the person who got it. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up, one of my favorite books, Master of the Senate, by Robert Caro, part of the LBJ series. The Senate as an institution, it reveres independence. It reveres, the entire theory of the Senate is to cool down the mob that is in the House of Representatives and to deliberate. That's its entire body. They are set up to be immune from public pressure. Now, I'm not saying they can't be pressured, but that example I just gave on Rick Scott is a very important one of he literally endorsed somebody for leader. So did Tucker Carlson. So did a lot of people online. And only 13 senators voted for Rick Scott. The truth is that they don't care. Like, they're set up where they're marginally popular in their own home states. They'll be able to win their primaries, and that's all they really need to do to get elected. And they have 6-year terms, not even up for 4 years. So will Elon still be interested in politics 6 years from now? That's a legitimate question for a Republican senator. So maybe he could get the House of Representatives to sign off maybe on some of his things, but there's no guarantee that the Senate is going to agree with any of that. There's a story that Karos tells in the Master of the Senate book, which I love, where Thomas Jefferson was in Paris during the writing of the Constitution, and he asked Washington, he said, "Why did you put in a Senate, a bicameral legislature?" And Washington said, "Why did you pour your tea into a saucer?" And Jefferson goes, "To cool it." And Washington says, "Just so." That's to explain it. He was a man of very few words. He was a brilliant man.
Okay, so you actually outlined the most likely thing that's going to happen with DOGE as it hits the wall of Washington. What is the sort of the most successful thing that can be pulled off?
The most successful thing they could do is right now, I think they're really obsessed with designing cuts, right? And identifying cuts. I would redesign systems of procurement. I would redesign the way that we have processes in place to dispense taxpayer dollars. Because the truth is that appropriations itself, again, are set by the United States Congress. But the way that those appropriations are spent by the government, the executive has some discretionary authority. So your ability as the executive to be a good steward of the taxpayer money and to redesign a system, which I actually think Elon could be good at this, and Vivek too, in terms of their entrepreneurial spirit, is the entire Pentagon procurement thing, it needs to be burned to the ground. Number one, it's bad for the Pentagon. It gives them substandard equipment. It rewards very old weapon systems and programs and thinking that can be easily defeated by people who are studying that for vulnerabilities. The perfect example is all of this drone warfare in Ukraine and in Russia. Drone warfare costs almost nothing. And yet drone swarms and hypersonic missiles pose huge dangers to U.S. systems, which cost more than hundreds of billions of dollars. So my point is that giving nimble procurement and systemic change in the way that we think about executing the mission that Congress does give you actually could save the most amount of money in the long run. That's where I would really focus in on. The other one is, counter to everything I just said, is maybe they listen. Maybe the Republicans are like, yeah, okay, let's do it. The problem again, though, is swing state people who need to get reelected, they need to do one thing. They need to deliver for their district. They need to run on stuff. And nobody has ever run on cutting money for your state. They have run on bringing money to your state. And that's why earmarks and a lot of these other things are extraordinarily popular in Congress, is because it's such an easy way to show constituents how you're working for them whenever it does come reelection time. So it's a very difficult system. And I also want to tell people who are frustrated by this, I share your frustration, but the system is designed to work this way. And for 2 centuries, the Senate has stood as a bulwark against literally every popular change. And because of that, it's designed to make sure that it's so popular for long enough that it has to become inevitable before the status quo can change. That's really, really frustrating, but you should take comfort in that it's always been that way.